Alrighty, it is right at the top of the hour here, so we will go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Anna. I'm an admissions counselor here at MSU, and I'm going to be your host for the webinar tonight. I will be introducing our presenters, and I will also be hosting the Q&A near the end of this presentation tonight. First of all, thank you so much for joining us. This is a really important webinar, especially with the FAFSA priority deadline coming up tomorrow. So I'm very excited that all of you decided to join us and learn a little bit more. I am going to put this slide up here. If you can't hear any audio right now, of course, you wouldn't be able to hear me say that, but you do have the option or the opportunity to call in to join this webinar. I also wanted to let everyone know that we will be recording this presentation and posting it to both our website and our YouTube. If you registered for this webinar, you will also be receiving an email tomorrow with that link to our YouTube within that. The other thing that I wanted to mention is the Q&A feature here on WebEx. If you don't have that open already, you can go to the bottom right-hand side of your screen, click on the three dots, and it should say Q&A on there. The Q&A feature is our version of a chat feature. So the chat is open, kind of. That is where if we have any admissions counselors or financial aid staff who need to drop a link into the chat, they can do so there. However, if you're going to ask a question, please use the Q&A feature. That allows us to respond to you directly. So please go ahead and use that if you can. Again, to access the Q&A feature, if you don't have it open already, go ahead and head to the right-hand side of your screen at the bottom. There's a little three dots right there, and you should be able to click on that and click Q&A, and you can post all of your questions in there. We do have admissions counselors and financial aid staff ready to answer those questions for you. So we do have two presenters tonight. That is James and Ryan. James is the Director of Financial Aid here at MSU, and Ryan is the Associate Director of Financial Aid. So I will go ahead and toss it over to James if you want to unmute yourself and take over.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Anna, for the introduction, and thank you for joining us for this webinar tonight. The 2024-25 FAFSA for sure is brand new. If you've done one before in previous years, it may not be that unfamiliar to you. If you've never done one before, this is the first time through this exercise. It might go just perfectly fine, but we know with things new that we have students and families that are experiencing some challenges. So we wanted to get in front of you and kind of just address some of those concerns and try to put some answers to some of those questions that we've been hearing on a pretty regular basis so far since the FAFSA has come up. So this first slide is just some information on how to find us. We're here to help with this process. We're here to kind of provide some assistance, and we can do that by you coming in, and if you happen to be in town, stopping in to see us, or the phone number's there, and the email to kind of get in hold of us is there too. And then if you ever have need to provide us with any documents, we have an uploaded feature right there that you can get a hold of us with. So next slide, please. Here are some things that are just kind of some intro pieces to the free application for federal student aid. And so that is what the acronym FAFSA stands for. This is the federal application that applies you for most every kind of financial aid eligibility. It is certainly the core application for federal eligibility, and that often rolls into state and institutional kind of programs as well. So that same information is used to make similar determinations. And so these are some preemptive things. And we have what's kind of first here is just kind of a number one thing is in order to enter the FAFSA for 24-25, you need a username and password. And if you have done an application before, this was formerly known as your FSA ID. But it is now bringing really the FAFSA into the current century and making a user and password with kind of this two-step verification of identity. So it's a secure process that everybody needs to, if you've had access in the past, you'll need to kind of refine that or kind of get where that is. If this is brand new to you, then this is these addresses here. One is a video to watch to how to set it up, and the other one is a link for where you can set it up and actually create it. And so this information both for student and most likely for parents. So each of you will need, most likely will need a user ID and password to get into the federal system. And not only will this federal system access be used for the FAFSA, but depending on the type of aid that you receive down the road, this provides you access into a student portal and your portfolio and everything like that. So this will be used for a long time. So once you create this username and password, keep it secure someplace, remember where it is. There are challenge questions and stuff that you're creating. So kind of really keep track of where it is. We've encountered several families so far that have to kind of refine that on an annual basis almost. So and create that and kind of go with that and where you go. The next website in the middle is the studentaid.gov. That's kind of the platform for where the FAFSA lives and a bunch of other processes. Once you've established your federal kind of relationship by accepting some federal aid, you're going to be using studentaid.gov quite a bit. You can also get federal updates and information on studentaid.gov. And if you just kind of go there, FAFSA, search for that, all these different parses in terms of the portal for the application will kind of come right up, but it's also an address that you'll need to get very used to. Whether you're from Montana or not, Reach Higher Montana, which is the very bottom one, is just another place that has some helpful insights into paying for school. There's a video there about talking about the new FAFSA. And if you're from a different state, you may also have an organization in your state that might provide some other more localized information. But we try and direct you really back to those federal sources as much as possible. There's glossaries, there are key answers to information, all kinds of different helpful resources there to kind of help you with not just the FAFSA, but your federal relationships and aid processing as you go down the road. So just be aware of what those are. So next slide, please. So how did we get here a little bit? So this is an act of Congress to change the free application for federal student aid, or the FAFSA. This was a long time coming. It's the first time this has happened in many, many years. And what we want you to know, and really just trying to set the stage for, is that this is a congressional piece. This was mandated through several rules and regulations and consolidation acts through the Department of Education, instituted and kind of managed by Congress. So just kind of know what that looks like in terms of how we kind of moved into this position that we're in today. Next one, please. So what this is called is a better FAFSA for a better future. So this is a big step. And like I said, this is the first time this has been redesigned and relaunched in, some people are saying, up to 40 years. So if you can imagine a system that's been in place for nearly 40 years, 30, 40 years, this is a big step for the Department of Education to create a new process, lift that into something new, and kind of bring us into a better place. And so the application is streamlined. We're experiencing where the eligibility for the federal Pell Grant is expanded, which means that is different for all kinds of federal student loan programs and other things. We're hoping for an expansion overall eligibility. So you may have incurred some process in the past that say, well, I didn't get anything, or it's not for me. This is a year, if you've done it before, to try again and kind of see what this expanded eligibility might do for you and see what kind of landscape might change in that specific area. What's also happening here is with a lot of the skip logic and a lot of the different parts with the streamlined processes, it's reducing barriers for certain student populations. So when you answer one question, you could jump right through or skip a lot of different sections that you might have used to have gone through before. So hoping that this is just a better experience. We'll caveat there, we're here today to kind of really talk about how we can help with some of the challenging situations, some of the things you might be experiencing. But this better user experience, we are also hearing from a number of different families and students who have completed this application. They have gotten through it in a much more faster timeline than what they've experienced in the past. So there is good news on the front end of this that says this is working better and can be a better experience for you as an applicant. Next one, please. So some other major changes with that, there is, in the past, there used to be more of an optional exchange with the IRS for bringing in income information. That is now required with this change. There is a secure profile and a pathway for you just to commit that process, and it goes right to the IRS and it brings in all the tax information that we need to determine eligibility. So if you file taxes, this is now a requirement for you to kind of use that and bring that back through. So know that exists. It's not information you see all the time because it kind of occurs kind of in the background, shoots out to the IRS and brings it back. So part of the challenge is you don't always get to see what it brings back in, but that's part of the secure enhancement of what this data exchange looked like. In a lot of respect, it removed a lot of questions, it reorganized the application, and adds a few questions here and there in terms of what's there. But the overall experience and the overall piece, what we're looking for here is to be better and simplified and smoother. The application used to produce what was called an expected family contribution. That is now being replaced by a student aid index. That is a much friendlier term. Like many things, when you plug information into a system, you get a result, and this index is a result of the information that you've input into the application, and it kicks out for schools to be able to use to determine eligibility. So that is a key component of the result of a successful application, is for us to get this student aid index. As I mentioned in the earlier one, we've seen, what could be, several percent of an increase of students who weren't qualified for Pell Grants before being able to get that now. So that's why we're strongly encouraging everybody for 24-25 to complete this process, even if you've had experience and process with this in the past. The other thing for these last two components really is that there are some other federal similarities and parallels kind of coming into place. So we're using federal poverty guidelines and everything to kind of measure student family and student income and what that looks like with the household size and where families might be and how that relates into your overall eligibility. So some realignments there on how to do that, and that makes this process a little more seamless as we kind of go through. Next one, please. So a new feature of the application for 24-25 and moving forward is going to be called contributors and the roles of contributors. So students have a lane kind of to themselves. They complete the FAFSA, they go through their process, and depending on that situation, they need to invite a contributor to be part of that application. And most likely for you as new freshman families, that's going to be a parent. If a student is married, that could be a spouse. But that parent or parents have to be invited. The application is going to ask you to provide information to make an invitation to a parent or parents to be able to get into the application on their own, complete their own side of the information, and process that application. So it's kind of almost like individual accesses into the same application, but a student gets to see their part, parents get to see their part without this kind of interchange of what that does. Again, that goes back into the big part of the security of the information and how that goes. And as that information is being secured and as that's being processed, there's a big part of you have to consent to this information being used and how it's going to be used. So look for invitation as a parent as being called a contributor and how you might go to that. There's also a YouTube video on that we put a link in here for as well. And you can kind of access that to see what that looks like. Next one, please. So part of the tips in terms of what we're looking for is to kind of follow an order. And we've kind of tried to lean into that a little bit as we've talked about the flow of this and how it goes. One of those is to first establish and make sure that you have your user ID and password all set. That is an integral part in actually getting into the application. And you don't want to be delayed by kind of fumbling forward or kind of looking around for where that might be. And parents, if you don't have one, you need to have that kind of right away before you can successfully get into the application and do that. So student, grab an ID, parent, grab user ID and password, and then student, complete your part of the FAFSA. That will get you to the finish line. That will ask you to kind of invite your contributors, and parents can go in and kind of do that after the fact. We've seen better success with this stream of being able to kind of do this and where that goes. Students, as you get into this process and kind of see where that looks like, in order to invite a parent, you need to know first and last name of the parent, social security number, date of birth, and a valid email address for them to be able to be invited into that application. That invitation will be an email that comes from Federal Student Aid, and that will go to the parent, and then the parent will need to grab that email and a link and get back into the application when that's done. The user ID is important because of it can take 2 or 3 days to kind of make that happen. So if you sit down, normally we would have events in the past where we would sit down with you and we'd be able to kind of get an FSA ID all on one soup, get into the FAFSA and kind of complete that. This security process now with the two-factor identification causes a little bit of a delay there, and you don't have one simultaneously with the other. And remind me what Barb mentioned earlier. Do you remember? No. We have some other tips just in terms of, the help text. When you're in the application, there are gray buttons next to questions. And if you click on those, there's help text and information to help you through that. We weren't going to go through the entire application tonight. What we wanted to do was get into the chat feature, kind of get into what that looks like, and look at where we're going with that thing and address specific questions that you have. It would take an hour, and there's so many skip logic questions and different processes to go through with this that going through the application by itself we didn't think would be functional, because every experience on that is a little bit different. So we're going to hop with that. If you go to the next slide, please. What this does for us, right? This is the application. This is the process that determines our ability to offer you federal financial aid. And with federal financial aid, it also rolls into, like I said earlier, to some scholarship eligibility, and also into other institutional programs and different things like that. So you're strongly encouraged to kind of break the myth of I don't qualify for anything, and I might only get student loans. But this is a great tool into kind of presenting your situation, right? And that can roll back into scholarships really easily. So presenting your situation, identifying who you are, makes a scholarship reviewer know a little bit more about you and a little bit more direction on where they might want to go. Work study is different for this year because the one thing that got eliminated from the FAFSA is that there is no question anymore that says, are you interested in work study? But we want to let you know that work study is an option. We have both federal and state programs here at Montana State. And if you want to work, need to work, we want to help facilitate you finding a work study position. So we want you to come see us, and you kind of got to, we can help you find a position, help you find work. If that work is a work study position, that is great for both you and the employer that you find to be able to provide you with some additional day-to-day kind of pieces. That's a paycheck as if you were working outside of that. The Pell Grant kind of has some description there. We're expecting the grant to be up to $73.95 this upcoming year. SEOG grants are the limited program we have from the federal government side of it. That's limited in nature. And the SEOG grant and the work study are, because they're limited in nature, are the reasons why we have a preferential filing date. And I know Anna mentioned that is scheduled to be February 1st. We will not be adhering to that as a hard preferential filing date for 2024-25. I want to let you know that, ease some concern if you're having a problem with the application, if there's any kind of challenge that you're having. We are well aware of those issues. We're well aware of some federal capacity and what they've shown, and for families to be able to get into the application or make corrections to the application. We know all that exists, and so we will not be adhering to a February 1st preferential filing date really hard this upcoming year. We don't know how we'll pivot on that just yet. We encourage you strongly still to be as timely with this as you can. But we know from families' experience so far to date that they've been able to get in, but not been able to get back in to make a correction or to do that. So we know those are some of the challenges that have been going on. And as a result of the delays of the institution being able to get records or get results of your application into the campus, we won't have that information until March sometime. So that's looking like mid to late March. So we just have this kind of gray area of gap where we'll be able to kind of facilitate and do some different things. So we're kind of begging your patience as this moves along the path, because you might very successfully get through and be there and have that notification, but we don't have the records yet from federal student aid. They haven't processed those and been able to deliver those to us yet. So we're looking at a kind of a compressed timeline as we move down the road. So don't stress too much about that priority preferential date of being February 1. We'll work with you as best we can for the limited funds and those limited programs that we have. So next one, please. So what you had to wear this year, the 2024-25 FAFSA didn't open until late December. This was a delay for us. The FAFSA normally opens on October 1st of the preceding year, meaning you have just started classes in the fall. You begin in August, and by October 1st, the next year's application is open. So while this was delayed until December this year and became open It's scheduled to go back to a 25-26 to an October date. So just normally what we say in events like this is that we need a couple of things on your calendar every year. And one is that October application for the next year opens up, kind of put that on your calendar. The other one then is that in November, the CAT Scholarships was our institutional scholarship portal, opens up on November 1 every year. So those are two critical dates. Put those on your calendar. Those are annual renewals. Each year that you're here at Montana State, we need those two things for you to get done. That opens up the door for the greatest possibilities of what you have, and we can kind of go from there. So let's see, next one, I think that was the last one. Yeah, so now we want to move in. This is kind of a first time that we've tried this. We're trying to pretend as if you were in a room and we were trying to help you, and we want to entertain your questions. So you put those in the Q&A. Anna's going to kind of facilitate some questions and answers for us, and we'll do our best here to kind of answer what that is. If we see very common questions kind of coming through, we'll address that to the larger group because it's very likely that you might have that same or similar question. Very individualized questions will be answered in that, but even if we throw it out, it's just good information for you to have on challenges that you might incur if you haven't already done the application. If you've done the application already, that's great. We're really excited to hear that. And again, we're just kind of working down the road until we can make some awards and do those different things. So we'll turn it back over for some Q&A.
Perfect. Thank you so much, James. We have some really, really awesome questions that we've pulled from the chat and that some of those who registered put in their registration form. So I have quite a few for you. The first one that I want to ask was actually just asked by Stephanie just a couple of minutes ago in the Q&A. That is, if the parent starts the process, they have a previously established FSA ID, and then they invite their child as a student and contributor, do you anticipate any issues with that as opposed to the student starting the process?
Not directly. We put the tip out there because we've seen and heard from people that that has been the most successful route for families to incur. We do know that, yes, a parent can go in and begin that process and what that looks like. And honestly, we'd be happy to kind of hear from you on the experience that you have with that, because we want to know how that works for you and how we can share that information back out. So I'd love to hear back on that. It is possible for that to occur, yes.
And I would add too, sometimes it's pretty rare, but sometimes parents will go in as though they are the student, believing that they're filling out an application for a student, but the application is actually registering the parent as a student. So it's just always highly recommended that if you're going to start the application, have the student start it with their username and password, do their portion first, and then parent. The FAFSA does allow the parent to fill out student data, but we're seeing in some cases where if you make a typo on, say, the SSN or the birth date on the student's info, sometimes the FAFSA won't let you go back and correct it. And so there's a few bugs in that way. And it also brings up another point too, that whenever you are inputting either student or parent social security number, birth date, and name, please make sure that it is right. There have been some bugs in there where if they did any typo in either case, sometimes that's causing some hiccups there. So we recommend follow the order of student first, then parent, and triple check that all of that personal information is correct before you send it off so that things match up and it becomes smooth.
Perfect. Thank you both for that. We have another pretty specific question from the Q&A. It says, when I was completing the FAFSA form, I was unable to get past the demographic section. The form was unable to save after I had typed in my alien number. She called the FAFSA office and they weren't very helpful. So what would be the best approach moving forward from here?
Alien number. So would this be alien registration number? And is this student a permanent resident? There might be some cases in which this student may be in a status that's not aid eligible. But what we would recommend is if there's some time carved out to call us and then have yourself down so you could go screen by screen and we could go through step by step to kind of see what answers are being input in what sections so that we can flow through from beginning to end together. If you're in town by chance, you can come to our office. That's great. We have computers, laptops. You can bring your own machine if you want. But lines are not long right now. So, and our phone lines typically aren't full right now either. So where we understand it's a challenge to get a hold of the Department of Ed at this time, the financial aid office is got a greater availability and we can walk through it step by step.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. Eliza, I hope that you caught that. The best way to go about that is definitely to call our office directly. And if you're able to sit down at the same time and kind of walk through that on the phone with them. So thank you both for answering that question.
Just
Another
to
question.
interject something there before you jump to the next one, we've heard of challenges with the federal student aid number and the customer service line there. That don't be afraid to even return a call back to them if you didn't get help on one. They have lots of different service reps that they do that. Some we hear are more helpful than others. So also don't be afraid to return a call to them. But we're here to kind of help guide that and kind of direct that if we can at all. So please give us that first try, and then there are things that have to be done through them. But if we can help articulate the problem and what that is, that might help a resolution when you contact federal student aid back again.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Another question that we had that I think has kind of been answered, but I just want to reiterate. Someone said that they had completed the FAFSA several weeks ago, and it's still saying on their account that it's processing or in review. Are we finding that that is common right now? Do we have a date that we can expect that they will be processed?
Great point. And everyone should be aware that is very common right now. That's common for almost every, I think for every record, not most every record. We believe that is common for every record, that status shows is still kind of being processed. Federal student aid will email out to applicants when they're ready. And we don't expect that to really happen right now until March. That's been part of the challenge of being able to get back in and do that. But if you successfully completed that, you're kind of in a holding pattern right now. So don't panic on that. Give that some time. We expect that to be released. We don't have a date. We'd love to give you a date. We just don't have one to be able to give. But that is very common right now for that status thing to look like it's still in process.
Perfect. Okay. A little follow-up question for that. Is it possible for students to still send us their FAFSA while it is still in review so that they can get it in before that February 1st soft priority deadline?
It's our understanding that the student could not even get into the system right now with that button that we just talked about to be able to get or print a record of what that looks like. And again, I would just caution, don't be too concerned about that priority preferential filing date. If you're really concerned about that, give us a call. We can talk about your application and kind of see if we think that's even going to impact you in any specific way. And if so, we'll make note of it in your file and kind of go from a measure from there. But from my understanding, there isn't a way for you to kind of produce a product of that and give it to us. And even if we had it, we couldn't put it through the system to kind of make an evaluation at this point.
Okay. Again, kind of another follow-up question to that. It seems that some scholarships on our CAT scholarship site ask for the FAFSA submission summary page from their application, but the student doesn't have anything on their page, or the FAFSA is still being processed. Is that a point where they should call our office and ask to see if they would even qualify for those scholarships, what they can do in that situation?
No action really needed on the student or family end at this point. We've communicated out to our CAT scholarship partners, so all the colleges and departments on campus, and we've made them aware of this situation. So they also know that they can't review or won't be getting data from the FAFSA at this point just yet as well. And so we've made our indulgences to them and asked them to kind of put off awarding until they can get that information, and most are very receptive to that. So we don't expect a lot of that activity to be impacted by that as well. We just know that we're all kind of waiting now for activity and action to happen later in March into April.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much.
I think it's important to note, like, we feel the anxiety about that priority date and the potential outcomes there. And we know that there's been various issues and families sometimes are getting stuck and they can't quite get the aid in. And so that's where we're coming in to say, we are not going to really hold to that priority date. We are not going to create an unfair situation where those that got lucky and got done and some that had a problem and weren't able to get their FAFSA submitted. We are just going to rethink that whole thing. And the two parts that are affected with that priority date is, of course, you want that data in the CAT Scholarships app, which James has said, we're telling them, hold off. Let's wait until things smooth out and everybody can get in and then go ahead and do the awarding. So rest assured, no worries there. Just on a weekly basis, if you're having troubles, reach out to us, reach out to Department of Ed, and then keep at it, and then we'll work on it together, get that in. And then the other version of the priority date, if there's any implications there, that will be completely rethought. We do not want to create any unfair situation. Right now, we just want to be there for the students and families, help them get it done, and make sure the process is smooth. So that's the key priority piece.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Just to get a couple of clarification questions. First, can you guys explain the difference between unsubsidized and subsidized loans so that students are a little bit more aware of what they're opting into when they eventually get that FAFSA back, the financial aid offer?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take that one. So a subsidized loan is the subsidized direct loan and the unsubsidized direct loan. They are the same loan. Interest rates are set in July by the government, and they have the same terms and everything else like that. If you have a portion of a loan that is considered subsidized, that loan does not collect interest while you are enrolled in school at least half time. So as long as you're still enrolled, that one just sits and the principal never grows, does not collect interest. The smaller loans, typically the unsubsidized loan, that one will collect interest while you're in school. That's kind of the main differences. So when it comes to responsible borrowing, we recommend that you first take a look at the subsidized ones because those are the ones that aren't going to increase while you're in school, and they're a pretty safe bet in all cases. And then as needed, you can certainly dip into the unsubsidized. It's not really that big of a growth factor, but the primary difference is the subsidized ones are meant to be kind of that help from the government saying, we're not going to charge interest on this one. We're going to subsidize it, so to speak, so that there's no interest collecting while you're in school. But note that that finishes either when you graduate or if you drop below half-time enrollment. So that's an important note. Sometimes students will take a semester off or something and then get notification that their loans are collecting interest and coming due, and they get worried. And but usually if they get right back in school, it's no problem.
Perfect. Thank you. And another kind of clarification question. Can you describe what work study actually means and how it might be different than having just a job on campus, how students can qualify for work study?
Sure, great question. Work study is a job on campus, and so there are different jobs all over campus. And so some of those jobs are work study, some of those aren't. That depends on the employer. One huge advantage is the work study program is really to the campus and to the employer on campus. You can work hourly on campus, or if you have a job that's subsidized by federal or state work study, I'll use financial aid as an example. So if we wanted to hire a student to work in our office, I would hire them at a certain wage and a rate, and that for round numbers, let's just call it $10. If it's a work study eligible position and we have that, as an employer, I would only have to pay 70% of that. I'm sorry, the other way around, 30% of that. 70% is covered by the work study program. So as I look at that from the employer standpoint, I could hire 3 students instead of 1 for the same fiscal obligation that I have with that. So as a student who's working, you get a monthly paycheck just like everybody else, twice a month, just like any other employee would on campus. So you earn those wages the same way. It's an employer advantage. And what that does, there's also some other incentives with work study programs that might get you more attached to people on campus, build some relationships, build some community. There's some resume building, different pieces that go along with that. You'll hear about a gold standard program, but it's really a more of a relationship building program that is built into the work study program, because we specifically ask employers who are employing students via work study to build a relationship and build community with a student, check in on them, do those things. So we look at it as more than just a job, but more an experience in a relationship as well.
Touch on eligibility too.
Great, yeah. Eligibility is need-based. This is a need-based program. So when we talked about that student aid index a little bit earlier, the result of your completion of the FAFSA gives us that index. And as we look at whether you're in state or out of state, we take a cost of attendance and take that student aid index minus that. And if that's a positive value, then you have positive need and you may be eligible for work study participation at that time. But it is need-based.
Just one more point too, I think it's important. The other element too that's a really a good advantage for the student is if an employer wants to create a job, they want, and they know that I have an option of creating a job where all of the money has to come out of my budget, or if I create a work study job, then it comes out of the work study funds, then that means that employer is going to want to lean towards work study because it's going to be less expensive for them. And so the advantage for the student is that means only students who have work study can get that job. So that increases the probability that you will get an on-campus job, something relatable. It might give you better hours, something that you can come in and out of during classes and things like that. There's a lot of advantages to a work study job because of the flexibility that's there and the desire for employers to want to hire work study students. And so their pool of applicants is somewhat limited because only those who have work study get that. And so that's where it becomes a high demand. And the other thing I would note is, let's say we get all done with the awarding and it's all said and done, but you don't have work study funds. That does not necessarily mean that you weren't eligible. Please reach out to us, give us a call, ask us. In a lot of cases, we've been able to give out work study funds to students after they've been awarded the FAFSA. So when it's been said and done, if you don't see it, feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email, or come in, however you want to do it. Just ask about it. There might be a good chance we could still give some to you.
Awesome. Thank you both for that clarification. I also just wanted to push it a little bit further, just to relate to a question that I just saw in the chat a couple of minutes ago. Even if you do not qualify for work study, or if you don't fill out the FAFSA, or if you fill it out and you don't submit it to us, there are plenty of student jobs available across campus that are not work study positions. So they are not paid for through financial aid. There's all kinds of positions. I know when I first went to college, I originally thought that I would get just a housing or dining job because that's what all of my friends had. And I thought that that was the only thing available to me as a position. But I ended up eventually working for the athletic department on their media team. So there's all kinds of student positions available that you wouldn't originally, I think of. So if you do want to explore those at all and maybe see what's currently available on campus, there is a website called hireabobcat.com. Hireabobcat.com is run through our Allen Yarnell Center for Student Success, and they show several positions that are available across campus. It's also a great resource for after you graduate MSU as well. So just for a little bit more clarification on that. So another question that we had from the chat was if both parents have to be contributors, whether that is if they are filing separately, if they are filing together jointly for taxes. Do both parents have to be invited to be contributors on that FAFSA?
That's a great question. I'll see if I can stay out of the weeds on it. So let's take a married filing joint situation and the parents are still married. In this case, the FAFSA actually recommends that the student not invite both. It gives them the option to, but it asks that they only invite one parent as contributor. So do that. And then what happens though, and let's make an important distinction here. The FAFSA only requires one parent to be the contributor, so to speak, in a married joint situation with two parents. But the FAFSA does require the name, social, birth date, and all the information for both parents in a married joint situation. So what will happen is, let's have our student go through, let's say the student picks mom, is invited, mom then goes in to do her portion, she completes everything, she gives the, the tax approval, what do we call that, consent. She gives a consent so that the taxes can be pulled through. All of that happens. And then it will ask the parent to complete information for the spouse. And so it looks like it's 2 invites, but it's not really. It's just, it is required to have both information on there, but just the one parent that was originally invited will do the final sign off and submitting. And so you don't necessarily have to have both involved in that case. That being said, if your biological parents are unmarried but living together, it would require both in that case because they would be filing taxes separate. And so that would require a contributor invite for both cases. Or if the parents filed separate, married filing separate for any case like that, that would also require both. The key piece is if they're joint filers and they've both done their taxes and signed off on that, it only requires one of them to say, I consent to have the tax information shared with the FAFSA. And so, but there's various scenarios that might ebb and flow in that, but just know that it should just be one. But note that you will need information for both parents, just the same, just one actually does all of the signing off and everything.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Another question here. Does having multiple students in college at one time affect aid? Does FAFSA take into consideration other siblings that are maybe older in different years of college or twins in the same year?
It's a good question, and it's a valid question for 24-25 because one of the questions that we lost in this cycle and this improvement here, and again, I'm going to kind of point back to the congressional part of this, is that question no longer gets asked on the application, but it doesn't have any impact into that student aid index calculation. So as a school, we're kind of frustrated with that, but from the calculation side of it, Department of Ed determined that that was not something that was required for us to move forward with this. So even though that question exists on the application and we'll be able to see it, that doesn't right now affect eligibility. If that's your case, we need you to come in and talk to us. We'll take a different lens and take a look at this, but we don't know really what kind of latitude we'll be able to have with that because it's actually been taken out of the formula. But come see us, please, because we would like to review the situation.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. Another question that we had was just a couple specifically about the kind of FAFSA process. Do we know at this point how long it takes to get an FSA ID generated typically?
We are seeing within 2 or 3 days.
Fantastic. Thank you. And another question that we had was, do we know how long we can expect the FAFSA to take to be officially processed to get that student aid index?
We don't know exactly how long that will take. We expect that we will have information that starts to be released from federal student aid in March. Excuse me, beginning to middle of March. Challenge with that will be is then schools have to load all this information into our system and kind of get that processed. So even though you receive an email from the department that says it's been now processed and the information has been delivered, we likely won't be able to actually pull that up and see it for a couple extra weeks while we get all those records loaded. Part of the challenge for schools during this delay will be no way to kind of manage the inflow of applications that have been sent. We will get those and then have to kind of just load as many as we can, as fast as we can in order to kind of establish a position where those are.
Perfect.
So no firm date, but look for email from federal student aid really that tells you that process has begun.
And a couple pieces I'll add as well. So James is speaking of a little bit into the whole big picture of the FAFSA is filed, it's delivered to the school then has permission to draw down the actual money, be it loan offers or grant funds and things like that from the Department of Ed, put them in Montana's systems, and then send out an award letter to the student said, this is your aid. And those are the final pieces there. But there was an important part of the question that mentioned about knowing your student aid index. For most students, what we're seeing is if they flow through and they're able to successfully submit it and it becomes in that review status, you should still get an email that actually says the student aid index and give you that number. And so you can probably see that unless there's something else that needs to process it or to tell you why. And usually right now, since they haven't finalized the Pell Grant amounts for the next year, but watch for continuing emails from the Department of Ed, because typically speaking, as soon as you submit that FAFSA and the SAI calcs, it's going to follow up with this makes you eligible for this much grant or this much loan. Watch information from your school. So it'll give you an idea. If you'd like kind of a good close estimate and you know the SAI after you've submitted, give us a call and we can kind of give you a rough, solid estimate of what your aid package might look like with that. With that caveat though, since we don't have anything finalized, but we want you to have as much information as you can to make the best decisions. And then the other part too, just a plug for this, that we have this process called verification, and want students to know what that means. This is still another kind of bump in the road that may happen to some of you out there, is the Department of Ed randomly is going to select certain files for the schools to review. And what that means is, as a school, if you get selected for this process called verification, we as a school are required to go in and audit your application and make sure all of your information is correct. That might mean we may need to collect taxes, or we may have a form and things like that before we can finalize your award. And so there's that piece too to watch for as more information comes out. If you see anything related to verification, or you get a notification from the Department of Ed that says you've been selected for verification, reach out to your school. When they send those data to us, we will also send you information saying, hey, you've been selected for this verification. We need this information from you. It's a good time to just call us, get ahead of that and get it done. We anticipate there won't be too many, but the Department of Ed has said that they're going to make it a very much of a random selection this year. Typically speaking, it's around 10% of those that apply get selected for that process, just so that the financial aid officers go in, make sure answers are being done correctly. So watch out for that too. Sometimes students don't know, they kind of miss the communications that they've been selected for that process. And we come around to fall and they're going, where's my aid? Where's my aid? I applied 6 months ago. And oh, we've been trying to reach out to you for this verification thing. What's that? And so just kind of make a little note of that to watch for further communications there. But usually things flow smooth and you get the application done, submitted. Even if it's not processed, it's going to generate that SAI for you. And once it is processed, the Department of Ed should be sending out following communications with estimated aid offers that they will tell you. It's something that they've traditionally done. I don't anticipate that they wouldn't continue doing that now.
Thank you very much. And just to reiterate once again, do we have any estimation, at least, when students can expect the financial aid packages to be given to students? So we have processed it and we're sending them their financial aid package.
We are hoping, and I can't commit too strongly to that, but we're hoping for middle of April to start sending those out.
Okay, perfect. And just to ease a little bit of anxiety with that, I know that seems so late, and it definitely is, because this FAFSA came out much later this year. Since this is a federal issue and not necessarily just MSU taking much longer, I just wanted to let everybody know in the Q&A that we don't have an official deadline for acceptance at MSU. We are a non-committal school, so even if you applied for housing, if you registered for orientation, if you submit your FAFSA to us, if you apply for scholarships, you even accept scholarships at MSU, that is not saying that you're actually going to attend. We won't assume that you're actually attending MSU until you're in a seat paying tuition, your bill is confirmed here. Your registration and attendance at orientation is taken as your intent to enroll, but you can still withdraw at any time. I know that lots of other schools have May 1st as their official deadline to fully commit to the school, but I wanted everybody to know that we don't have one of those at MSU. You might receive some emails from us that encourage you to take the next step, but you can take every single step at MSU and still have the freedom to decide. So I just wanted to let everybody know that. I saw that coming up in the chat a couple of times. Another question that we had here was, can students accept grants from the FAFSA or from MSU without accepting a loan? Can they pick and choose what's best for them?
Good question. Yes, the answer to that is yes, they can. Grants are automatically accepted because that is free money. Loans would be in an offered status, meaning you have to take action in order to accept a loan that is on your award notification. So that is something you'd have to log in and take action on. But the grant or any free money would be automatically accepted for you. Same would be work study won't be there in the initial piece, which is why we talked about that quite a bit. But if you find a job, ask the employer certainly if it's work study eligible and shoot for that. And if that's the case and they say they have one for you, then you need to come talk to us right away and see if we have the ability to actually award you the work study.
Perfect, thank you. Another question that I have actually received a couple of times in an email over the last few days is the timeline for CAT scholarships. We know that that priority deadline is February 1st. Do we know or possibly have any kind of timeline as to when those scholarships will actually be awarded to incoming students?
The CAT scholarship process is done primarily by the colleges that make those reviews. That process begins sometime in what I would call late February into March and can go all the way through the rest of spring and into summer. So it depends on the college, it depends on the opportunity, depends on the award cycle for that. Many of those are geared toward college merit, showing your college academics, but there are some in there that are freshmen. So, but generally you would not hear about those till maybe even after you've heard about the FAFSA because of the review and the criteria that goes into those.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And if anybody still on here had applied for the WUI, the Western Undergraduate Exchange, or the Presidential Scholarship, we will be notifying recipients of the WUI scholarship here in February. You can expect that early to mid-February. So if you received one, you will receive a notification from us. And then if you applied for the Presidential Scholarship, you can expect to hear back if you were selected for an interview here within the next 2 weeks-ish. So they are working on that. Our WUI review process has just finished up, and they should start notifying interviewees for the Presidential Scholarship here shortly. So those both will be coming out here in February. Another question that we had here is if it's more about special circumstances. So if a student is technically a dependent on their parents' tax returns, they are claimed as a dependent, but the parents are either not in the picture or not willing at all to provide their information for the application, what should students do in that situation?
Good question. They have, depending on how they've approached the FAFSA, there might be a couple options here. There is one option within the FAFSA itself that says I'm not going to use any parent data. And the challenge with that is that you are eligible then for only the unsubsidized loan. So that does not put a student in the best situation possible. And if that's where you are as a student, we need to have a conversation. So we need you to get a hold of us. Otherwise, there are other situations where parents may not have a financial responsibility, but still might be responsible for establishing eligibility, which means we need to kind of leverage ourselves and put ourselves in the position where parents have helped complete the FAFSA, but that may not commit them to any kind of obligation. There are two kinds of, there is a process for these unusual circumstances. And what I would ask first is for you to kind of head to our webpage, and on our left-hand column bar, we have a box or a tab for the unusual circumstances. And we'd like you to read that, kind of go through that, see how that might fit your situation. And that followed up then by a contact to us so that we can have a conversation about your situation, determine what our eligibility might be, give you the appropriate forms to be able to move in that direction, and then make an evaluation of what you had based on what's provided.
Okay, thank you so much. Another clarification that I just wanted to mention, because I did mention the WUI and the presidential earlier. You are currently a senior in high school and you are going to be attending MSU in the fall of 2024. Those application processes have already closed. The application deadline for the presidential scholarship for incoming freshmen was December 1st, and the application deadline for the WUI was January 3rd of this year. So just know that if you did not apply for those, unfortunately, you did miss the window. However, I do really recommend that you fill out that CAT scholarships application still, just to see if you qualify for any either need-based scholarships or any departmental scholarships available on there as well. We do have a couple minutes left here, so I just wanted to ask one more special circumstances question. If a student's or parent's financial situation has dramatically or drastically changed since the previous tax year, is there any way that they can get that considered as a special circumstance? Is there any way to report that through the FAFSA?
It is an allowable special circumstance. It's done or initiated with the school, not with doing it on the FAFSA directly. So the FAFSA does ask and requires prior year information. So we request that you fill that out at face value, put in what's needed there for those information. And then what you want to do is would ask you to wait until you've been awarded so that we know what we're trying to change. But there is a process for us to then look at that initial award, evaluate a different year of income, and a school can make those changes or corrections or inputs directly from our end and make that change to eligibility.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And one last question just to close us out here. If the family has previously filled out the old FAFSA, whether that's for an older sibling or a parent or something like that, and they didn't receive any aid or didn't qualify for anything, can they expect different results? Should they still consider filling out the new FAFSA? What would be the benefits of that for them?
Well, one, because it's new and because the calculation behind the formula is changing, we encourage strongly for you to take the FAFSA and do it again this year. And when we say not eligible for things, that probably means everyone is eligible for a loan of some kind by completing the FAFSA. So you have eligibility in some fashion. So you're strongly encouraged to do that application, see if this expanded eligibility affects you in any way. If it doesn't, the very least that you have is at least some good information moving forward on what that looks like. Another reason why we strongly encourage the FAFSA every year, even if you know you might only get loans or that you're not interested in any loans, is that as you talked about those special circumstances and income changing and different things like that, life circumstances happen. And if that FAFSA is on file and we've been able to do something with it, if life changes, we'll be able to pivot and make a change on that pretty quickly rather than waiting for you to complete a FAFSA, waiting for us to get the results. So you're strongly encouraged to do that. The third encouragement that we have for completing the FAFSA is scholarship eligibility. We talked about CAT scholarships, and it's not uncommon for that FAFSA information or some of that value to be visible by a reviewer group looking at a scholarship. And so seeing what that is and being able to kind of assess that for overall eligibility is important for some scholarship review. So that's why we encourage it always to be done, even if you choose not to take loans that have been offered to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I just want to give a huge shout out to James and Ryan for answering all of our questions and presenting tonight, and also to the financial aid and admissions staff who have been in the Q&A answering all of the questions that you have. If you get to the end of this, or maybe you go to sleep tonight and you suddenly wake up in a cold sweat because you forgot to ask us a question, don't worry, we are available always. This is the contact information for both admissions and financial aid services. So if you do have any leftover questions whatsoever, feel free to shoot us an email. If you shoot admissions in an email, we might redirect you to financial aid if it is specifically about the FAFSA or about scholarships that are not admissions-based scholarships, but we are always happy to help. Again, thank you so much for joining this presentation tonight. If you did register for this webinar, you will receive a link in an email tomorrow to watch this, just to kind of look back, see if you missed anything at all. And this is always available on our website or on our YouTube. So again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. If you are interested, we do have an orientation webinar happening next Wednesday. That's going to be all about the orientation process, how to register for orientation, what does orientation actually look like, how does class registration work, all of that good stuff. So please join us next week as well if you are at all interested in that. If you are interested in attending MSU in fall of 2024, I think that's going to be a very helpful webinar for you. That registration link is available on our website. You also can check your email. You probably received about 5 emails about it already from us. So again, thank you again for joining us tonight. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to either of our offices. Again, thank you to our staff. Thank you to everybody who attended. Have a great night and go Cats.